Good afternoon and Ayubowan to all of you. Um, and we warmly welcome you to the 13th webinar of SARNET, South Asia Rainwater Network. And we are happy to have a team with a wealth of knowledge on water resources from CWRDM Kozhikode, India, led by the Executive Director, Dr. Manoj Samuel. Since this is we have come to the 13th webinar in the SARNET webinar series, I would just like to briefly tell you all who we are, who SARNET is. So talking about SARNET, so here we do have a lot, like Dr. Samuel is a SARNET member, and who has also contributed to SARNET events, starting with that. So SARNET, South Asia Rainwater Network, was initiated after long felt need highlighted by water professionals in South Asia during several deliberations that was held, the Colombo Declaration, like signed by the ministers, starting way back as 2006. So this has been like, if you go to the SARNET website also, you may you may be able to find details. So just to say who we are, like all of you, we are like-minded and individuals who want to who are interested in conservation, efficient use of water, who have been working in this sector for several years, trying to make a change, trying to lobby for different, not only rainwater harvesting, but on several other fronts. And trying to make a claim for water conservation, for rainwater harvesting, and so on. So, Rainwater Harvest South Asia Rainwater Network is a collective of such individuals, not only from South Asia, but also from other regions across the globe, including Africa and East Asia, and even some Latin American countries, and places like Australia and so on. If you see, we have our presence in the web, in the SARNET website, and in social media platforms also. So as of today, we are happy to say that we have over 180 members from 16 countries who have been joining to share their knowledge, skills, and research findings, and we are hoping to do much more with our journey has just begun. Like, we are just a toddler, but we have quite an ambitious plan for the future, and we are all passionate about making a change. So this is as a result only, like, this webinar series is continuing. And SARNET has been mostly in the past couple of years has been sharing knowledge through webinars like this in the social website and social media platforms. So we've had 12 webinars in the past on several different topics, joined by resource persons across the globe, and 2 international conferences. One we had to had virtually during the pandemic time, our first inaugural conference in 2021 in September, and then the recently concluded conference in May that happened in Sri Lanka, for which some of you joined. And we also have, we have just started a platform for young professionals interested in water matters. So that is the Young Rainwater Champions Collective from last year. So we have just started inspiring others to make a change, to adopt rainwater harvesting, to make a case for rainwater harvesting in other countries. So people come forward to share their experiences. And we have been fortunate, like these are some of the events, to get activists like Pondman from the Pondman of India, Mr. Ramveer Tanwar for our conference. Like these are some of the activities that we've had, like a snapshot of what we've had in the past. Webinars and some of the trainings we had, like we also had a training on construction and maintenance of rainwater harvesting systems in May, and a tour of rainwater harvesting sites in Sri Lanka. As you know, Sri Lanka has a rich heritage of irrigation and rainwater harvesting. So that, like, without taking much time, I would like to invite any of you who has not become a member yet to join the SARNET community, and also to be updated by subscribing to our YouTube channel, which also has interesting discussions, featuring interesting discussions on water and development. So thank you. And I would like to introduce, just give a brief about lead moderator for today, Dr. Manoj Samuel. He's like, I would start with the introduction that he's a SARNET member, which we know that Dr. Samuel has developed and popularized many technologies, including water filtration systems, polythene lined ponds for water harvesting, GA toolkits, and several many more. And he is a researcher. Like, you can find much more information if you go to the CWRDM site for what he has done. And he has, I think, he has made a huge contribution, being the state manager of World Bank aided rainwater harvesting campaign of government of Kerala. And at present, he's the executive director of CWRD. Over to you, Dr. Samuel. We also have Dr. Sushant, who's a senior principal scientist, and Dr. Vivek, who will be joining with Dr. Samuel. And I must also tell you that we have looked at the questions that you have shared, and the team will be also, in the presentations, will be answering your questions. You also have a chance to have a raised hand at the question and answer session. So over to you, Dr. Samuel.
Good morning and good afternoon for different participants from different parts of the world. Greetings from CWRDM. Like Tanushi told, our CWRDM stands for Center for Water Resources Development and Management. This is a research organization under Kerala State Council for Science, Technology and Environment. And today we will discuss on a very interesting topic, that is water budgeting and some aspects of rainwater harvesting. So I don't have much role here. I will just put the platform. I will set the platform, and after that, Dr. Sushant and Vivek will join, and they will explain in detail about water budgeting and different aspects of rainwater harvesting. So as a beginning, I will have a few slides so that I will set the platform as I told earlier. So I will begin my presentation. Let me share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes.
Yeah. Today's discussion is on water budgeting and rainwater harvesting. I got an opportunity to be with Tanushi and her team at Sri Lanka a few months back. And we heard a lot of participants from different parts of the world. And the one thing what I understood is, water is a very, very important commodity and is a limiting factor wherever it is. And people are looking for alternatives, new technologies for conservation, for management, and for reuse of water. Because water is everywhere water is a issue. Many places people are not getting enough water for different purposes, even for drinking water. So that one of the solution is, rainwater harvesting. We will discuss in detail maybe in the coming sessions. But before that, we have to count how much we have. So that there is a saying in English, which cannot be measured, cannot be controlled. So that the basic principle here is we are going to measure how much water we have in a micro catchment area, or in a micro land area, in terms of different sources. Maybe it is a river, it may be surface water, groundwater, import or export. So what is the total supply of water, and on the other side what will be the total demand of water? So that supply and demand of water we are keeping on on two sides, and we are just weighing which is actually which place we are actually getting the water, and which are the uses which we are envisaging for this water. So that supply, supply is basically from rainfall, then surface water, groundwater, and maybe export from outside, and some water we will be exporting to outside, and some water we will be importing from maybe the nearby areas. So that which all are the supply sources. On the other side, we will also see what all are our demand for domestic use, demand for drinking water purposes, demand for agriculture or irrigation purposes, demand for industry and other commercial uses, demand for fisheries, demand for tourism. So at all the demands we will list out on the other side. And all these demands, we have to also see the perspective of climate change. We have to see the future scenarios. Based on these future scenarios, what will be the demand? What will be the changes in demand? So that on one side, we have the supply calculations. On the other side, we have the demand statistics. So that these two things actually we are actually comparing, and finally we are coming to a conclusion that whether our water supply is enough, or whether we have to work for increasing the supply or reducing the demand. So that these are the things actually we will be discussing in detail in the coming sessions. And in Kerala is a small state in the southern part of India. It is very close to Sri Lanka if you calculate the aerial distances, and our climate and our topography and maybe the vegetations, even the food habit is, we have a lot of similarity with the Sri Lanka. And here in Kerala, we last year we started a new program. We have a Green Kerala mission in our state, and under the aegis of this Green Kerala mission, we are giving the technical support, and we are actually making the water budgets for all the local self-government departments. In the state, we have around 1,000 self-government departments. We call it Grama Panchayat. So that all these micro level areas, maybe a panchayat may be having around 500 to 1,000 hectare area. And this area, we are actually calculating the water supply as well as water demand. And as I told, in different perspectives. So that maybe in future years, we have a base document. What is the status of our water, and how we can allocate, distribute, use this water in a more judicious way. And all the other activities, watershed activities, or the animal husbandry activities, industry, fisheries, everything is actually connected to this one. And maybe in the future years, we will be connecting this to carbon neutrality concept as well. So that what is the emission and sequestration in that particular land area, what is the water availability and water demand, and everything will come as a part of a bigger algorithm. And this algorithm will tell you how much water you can use for a particular purpose, and how much carbon is getting emitted, and how much sequestration systems you have to develop, or which is existing. So finally, we can actually convert all these things into figures. And this actually, maybe in the future years, it can be converted to green credits, or some better carbon trading activity, and lot of future options are available. And in Kerala, we developed a guidelines for water budgeting. This has been circulated to all the Gram Panchayat, or this local self-government departments, micro level governing units, and they are making. And the one important thing, one very maybe surprising for some of you, the thing is that all this exercise has been done by the people themselves. Actually, no scientist or no technocrats are involved. We are just giving advices. Remaining all the calculations, the preparation of this, this report, this technical report is done by the pupils themselves. So that we are telling it's actually a pupils participated project or people campaign or some whatever you can say, so that the community is engaged for measuring and the budgeting their resources. And our Honorable Chief Minister of Kerala has launched this project a few months back, and it has been widely covered. We became the first state in India to adopt water budget. And more details about water budgeting, Sushanji as well as Vivek will be speaking to you in detail, so that I am not going to the details of water budgeting concept. And maybe rainwater harvesting, a few slides I will show, and I will finish off my presentation. Rainwater harvesting, as we all know, it is very important for harvesting rain when it is available and use it for the lean season. So the rainwater harvesting is a method. It is wherever water is in scarce, this is the only alternative. Maybe it is a place where coastal area where seawater intrusion is there. Water is available, but it is not in a potable condition. Or maybe in a hilly area where actually there is no water at all available. Maybe in a desert area where is no water availability. So that wherever water availability is less, the only option is harvesting rainwater and use it for the the lean season. So the rainwater harvesting can be in different ways. The perspectives, the policies, or even the technologies differs from place to place. The urban area, it may be different. Rural area, it may be different. Or maybe the forest area, it may be different. That means in the agricultural area, it will be different. Maybe in a very urban area, it will be different. In a in a humid area, it will be different. In a semi-arid or arid area, it will be different. So that we have to adopt the strategies based on the topography, the rainfall, and other climatic parameters, the demography, the people's preferences, management practices. So many things we have to take care. But whatever it is there, we have a lot of water available from the sky. In our state, we are getting almost 3,000 millimeters rainfall in Kerala. Maybe in some part of Sri Lanka also, we are getting the same rainfall. But we have friends from Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and some of the European countries. But the rainfall may vary. But if you calculate the rainfall, in most of the places, the water which is actually falling on our roof may be enough to store the water for the lean period. The lean period in any places may be 100 days or maybe 150 days. So that the water which is coming to the sky from coming to our roof from the sky, if it can be stored in a tank for a few months, and it can be used during the summer or drought months. And there are different strategies, and even groundwater recharging also connected to that. And we'll not be discussing in detail about all those things. But only thing is that the supply is actually, in most of the places, supply is good enough to meet the demand as far as rainwater harvesting is concerned. I have some calculation on the right side of my slide. It is based on, the rain in this rainfall of 1 centimeter, 170 centimeters is based on the rainfall in Delhi. So that even in Delhi, which is not having only 50% of the rainfall which Sri Lanka or west coast of India gets, but even the roof water, the water available in the roof is enough to manage a family of 4 for at least 1/3 period of an year. Because other time in the year, maybe 200 days in a year, we have some sources. But maybe 100 or 120 days in a year, we have no sources for water. That time we can use this water. So that roof water harvesting can be, as I told, we have different strategies, we have different schemes, we have different technologies. One of the common thing is, the water from the roof can be actually collected through this gutter system, and it has to move through a filter, because that is very important, because we are actually collecting water for the drinking purposes or domestic purposes, so that the impurities should not be there, so that the contaminants which is coming from the roof should be filtered out, so that we should have a filter. We have very efficient three-layer filter system we are using. We are basically using sand, gravel, and maybe some fibers or adsorbent like this charcoal, and the water can be stored in a tank. And the extra water, the water which is coming from the roof, we have to harvest only 10% of that. Remaining 90%, actually 90 or 75%, whatever it is actually just going waste. Why don't we convert, we divert that water directly to our ponds or open wells, so that recharge is also possible. And this is from different parts of the globe. This blue one in the center is from Sri Lanka. I have taken this picture when I was visiting Sri Lanka a few months back. This is from on right side. You can see one photo. This is from Thrissur in Kerala itself. Water from the roof is harvested in this small tank, Syndex tank, plastic tank. Remaining water is actually diverted to the well directly. And this is from Nepal. I took from some of your slides only, Nepal. This is from Sri Lanka itself, that pumping tank. And the water that is for drinking water purpose, for a domestic use, for the use of a family. But for agriculture, this type of small quantity is not enough. So what we can do? We can harvest water in large lined ponds. We have different lining materials available these days. It may be UV laminated, multi-layered polythene sheets. We have nylon sheets, and maybe these days we can have even biodegradable plastic sheets. And this water in huge quantity we can save. There's the capacity of this tank is almost 5 lakhs liter. The capacity of this is 18 lakhs liter. This is 2 crores. This is from Goa. This all actually we designed. This actually I took the photograph. We have not designed. This is from Goa. 2 crores liters. That means 20 million liters of water can be stored here. Basically for agro-tourism he is using. This is again from Kerala, 20 lakhs liter capacity. This is from northeastern part of India. And this is the last slide of mine. The rainwater harvesting, wherever it is, the basic principle in rainwater harvesting is catch the water where it falls. And of course, reduce the velocity of running water. Here what we do, we are catching the water from the sky, maybe in a lined or unlined pond. Unlined pond means it will also support the recharge, but of course, some percentage of the water we may be losing by means of seepage and percolation. At the same time, the water which is coming from the upper reaches can be diverted through some vegetated waterways or some in situ filtration systems, and it can be stored in the same tank. So that the water, both the catch the water where it falls is very important as far as rainwater harvesting is concerned, whether it is your rooftop, whether it is your agriculture plot, whether it is your community land or whatever it is. Harvest it and use it for your different purposes, so that the pressure on the groundwater can also be reduced. Thank you very much. I will not take much time because two very experts of this subject are waiting. And so that I will stop now, and I think I can take the questions maybe towards the end of the presentation, and I will close my presentation just now. And now I now I invite Dr. Sushant for this presentation, and Dr. Sushant, actually, he's a former scientist of CWRDM. He was formerly senior principal scientist and head of land and water management research group of CWRDM. And he holds an MTech in soil and water conservation, soil and water engineering from Cranfield University, United Kingdom. He has more than 35 years of experience in the field of water management, irrigation, soil and water conservation, environmental management, etc. in Europe, Middle East, and in India. And he already acted in different positions like irrigation engineer in McDonald. He was environmental consultant at Muscat, Oman. And of course, he was a senior principal scientist at CWRD. And he was a member of DRIP, that is Dam Rehabilitation and Improvement Project of Central Water Commission, New Delhi. And he visited many places, including India and Japan. And he was a team member of Kerala Agriculture University's package of practices. And he was a scientist. He contributed immensely for conservation of water in the state of Kerala, and also as a whole in India. So that I welcome Engineer Sushant for his presentation. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, all of you. First of all, let me thank my director for the kind introduction. And I also take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this program for giving me this opportunity to have an interaction with all of you. So what probably we'll do maybe for the next 20 minutes is have a quick look at the need for water budgeting. And then Vivek will present about the technical aspects of how we actually do that, okay? So before that, we'll have a quick look at why we need water budgeting and some of the basic aspects related to water, because I understand that this is sort of a diverse group which is coming from different countries. So just give some of the things which you may already know, but still we'll have a quick look at some of the basic aspects. One of my former director used to say that the name of our planet is wrong. We call our planet the planet Earth. And when we say Earth, what we normally mean is the soil part or the land part. That's what we normally mean. That's why we call Earth movers, etc., etc. But all of us know that if you look at a photo of a planet from space, the major part of it is covered by water. We learned that in the school itself. So it should have been called planet water, not planet Earth. That's what he used to say. And what it basically means is that you've got so much water on the planet. But unfortunately, even though we have got so much water on the planet, we have drought or water scarcity in many parts of the world. Why do we have that? We'll have a quick look at that aspect as well. Now, one of the basic aspects, again, what we learn at the school level itself is that even though we've got large quantity of water, almost 97% of that is in the oceans, which is saline water, which for all practical purposes, we cannot directly use it. Of course, we can use it by desalination, etc. But normally, we cannot use it directly. So the fresh water that is available to us is hardly 3% globally. Now, even within that 3%, the major part of that, we again learned that it's in the polar regions ice caps. So what we see in the rivers or as a groundwater is hardly 1% of the total fresh water that is available on the planet. So that is one of the problems that we face. Now, so far we have been talking about the percentage of water that is available. But if you actually convert that into liters of water or m cube of water that is available globally, and they divide by the global population, then we see that again we have got a huge quantity of water, fresh water that we're talking about. We have got 5,800 m cube of water per person per year, or 16,000 liters of water per person per day. That's a quantity of fresh water that is available, even if you have say that it's only 1% of the water that is available. But again, as I said earlier, we have the problem that in many of the places we have water scarcity. And the primary reason for that is the water is not distributed evenly over the water of the land surface or in the places where we need it. That is, well, when people are there living, sometimes we find that there is no water there. Whereas in some of the forests and other places where people, we don't need water, but of course other plants and other species will need water, we've got lot quantity of water. So there is a problem that the water is not uniformly distributed over the land surface. We've got some places we've got a lot of water, we've got some places we've got less quantity of water. If you take countries like, for example, Canada, you've got per capita availability is very, very high. But if you look at some of the places in the Middle East or even Africa, you'll see that our per capita availability is very, very less. Now, based on this water availability, actually you can classify the countries based on the water stress. And there are different indicators for that. This is just one of the examples which we can have a quick look at that. Now, this indicator says that if the availability is more than 1,700 m³ per capita per year, then there is no stress. And if you go down, if it is less than 500 m³ per capita per year, then you've got an absolute scarcity. So it's one of the classifications. There are other classifications as well. Now, in the map that is given below, again, you can see that different areas are classified based on the water scarcity. When we talk about water scarcity, again, you have to keep in mind that there are two types of water scarcity. One is a physical water scarcity. Another one is what we call as an economic water scarcity. In the physical water scarcity, what we basically mean is that even if you dig deep into the ground, there is no groundwater aquifer also there. Okay, there is no surface water, there is no groundwater. Physically, the water is not available in that place at all. Okay, then you have to look at other terms. Either you have to import the water from somewhere else, or you have to desalinate it, or you have to harvest the dew, or all those other techniques are there. So that is basically what we call as a physical water scarcity. Middle East, etc. If you take a look at it, we have what we call as physical water. Even in India, if you look at some of the northeastern part, some of the areas, you will see that, not northeastern part. If you come to, for example, Tamil Nadu, etc., you will see that you've got a water scarcity problem there. The other one is what we call as an economic water scarcity. There may be water in that particular region, but you don't have the money or the resources to actually tap the water out, okay, or use that water. That is one of the problems that we have, what we call as economic water scarcity. In India, for example, in some of the northeastern parts, we have got this what we call as an economic water scarcity. There may be water deep inside, but people are not able to abstract it and use it. Okay, so that may be another problem that we face. Economic water scarcity to a certain extent we can overcome because somebody can give aid or some support, financial support to that particular place, and then we can overcome that. Now in Kerala, if you just have a quick look at that, if you look at that stress conditions, what is mentioned there, we lie in the region of around 1,142 MQ per person per day, per capita. Now that means that we are in that slightly above that scarcity area. We are in that area where we have slight stress. Now later on, we will see that we have got much more problems actually associated with water. Now again, it's not a problem that the water scarcity and this sort of issues is not a problem that is faced in the developing countries or underdeveloped countries. Even the advanced countries, like for example the US, in some certain places they have got these water scarcity issues. Like for example, if in California, in many of the years they have this case, they face acute water scarcity. And when we face water scarcity, not only here, anywhere globally, what we normally do is we try to prioritize the water use. And drinking water normally comes in the first priority, and then comes irrigation, and then the other aspects. Okay, depending upon the place where you're actually looking at it. So there, for example, they had even coined a new slogan which says that brown is a new green, because they are not irrigating the grass, and the grass turns the sort of a brown color because it's not getting water. And it's a phrase which they coined to actually used in those drought seasons. Next one. There are other problems, like for example, in South Africa, in Cape Town, probably all of you might have read the newspapers. A couple of years back, they were facing acute water scarcity. Right from 2013 onwards, what was happening was the rainfall was, every year the rainfall that they received was very low. And ultimately what was happening is all those dams which were supplying the water to the people, actually they were drying down. And then in 2017-18, they were saying that it may totally stop and they may have to stop the entire water supply. So they were fearing that. But fortunately, what happened was later on, the rain picked up and then got more rainfall, and then that problem was somehow sorted out. So this can happen anywhere. It's just like an example. It can happen anywhere, especially with the new scenario that we are facing now. Next one. The major problem that we're facing now, especially when we talk about water, is the climate change. And this is again a thing which all of you might know what we mean by climate change, how it is caused, etc. I'm not going through those details. Now, the problem that we face with climate change is that how this climate change is going to affect any country, or if, for example, if I take Kerala, we are not sure how this is going to impact us in, say, another 5 years or another 10 years, etc. It's not the problem with Kerala alone. If you take any place globally, we are not able to predict how this climate change is going to impact us, say 10 years from now or 5 years from now, whatever it is. The problem why it is so complicated is the prediction of climate, even though we've got very sophisticated computer models to predict the climate, etc., there are a lot of very sensitive parameters, input parameters inside. So even a slight change or a slight error in some of these parameters, we're going to get some very different results. So because of this highly complicated scenario, we are not able to predict how the climate is going to be another 10 years down the line. So in some places, we may get more rainfall. In some places, we may get less rainfall. All these sort of things can happen. And we see it quite often now. Like, for example, last week in the Middle East, there was heavy rain in Dubai and many other places where normally they get very less rainfall. Whereas in some of the places, we are getting very high rainfall and flood. Like, for example, in Kerala itself, in Trivandrum, last week, we got a flood. So this is occurring. That is, the extreme events are also occurring very frequently. So this is creating a lot of problems for us. How are we going to solve all this? That is one of the major problems that we have. Now, in India, if we take a quick look at that, there are a lot of issues related to water. Like, for example, the first one, if you look at that, what is given in the first map, it gives that areas where we are facing acute groundwater scarcity because of the excessive use of the groundwater, especially for the irrigation purposes. The groundwater is fast depleting in those places. And then this fast depleting groundwater is creating a lot of environmental issues as well. Okay. Now, it's not a quantity of water alone that we have the problem. We have the problem with the quality of water as well. Because when the quantity becomes less, again, you've got a problem that sometimes environmental issues, like, for example, you might have heard about the arsenic poisoning, which is there in the West Bengal, or in some other places where because of the contamination, which is let out from the industries, etc. So all sort of issues, we have these water-related quality issues as well. In Kerala, for example, one of the major problems that we face is the bacteriological contamination of the coastal areas, because the coastal areas is highly or densely populated. And in Kerala, we've got a unique system where each household has got an open well. And a small house situated in a small area of land where you've got a house, we have got a open well, which they use for abstract the water for drinking and all other purposes. And you also have a septic tank or other things which is disposing your household waste which is coming there. So this actually contaminates the groundwater that is available. So that is one of the problems that we face in coastal areas. So like that, you've got a lot of other issues as well. We'll go next. Another issue that we have in India, I'm sure that this is there in other countries as well, is urbanization. Because of the job opportunities and the better living facilities which are available in the, or higher living standard that is available in the urban areas, a lot of people are actually migrating from rural area to the urban area, and which is again creating a lot of problem for us or a stress for us, because the density of population in a particular area is going on increasing. And we have to cater to the not only water, even various other resources to that people as well. So that is another problem that we are facing, that is a rural to urban migration. Another issue, as I already said, is drought. Now what we are seeing is, for the past a few years, if you take a look at it, most of the parts of India, we are facing acute drought as well as flood in the same year. Okay, in the same year, the same place, we have, in some seasons, we are facing a good problem with the flood, and in some season, we are facing the problem with the drought. So this is actually happening cyclically or more frequently in the past few years. And this is creating a lot of problems for us. Now, added to this, because of this heavy rainfall, etc., we have other issues like, for example, landslides, landslips. For example, in the steep slopes, if you get heavy rainfall, actually what happens is the soil will not be able to hold too much water there. And then if the land holding is very less, especially the plants where the area where it has been deforested for agriculture or urban purposes, etc., or the land use has been changed, what happens is the soil just slips down and then creates a lot of havoc downstream. So we have that problem as well. Now, I'll take you a small example of what is happening in Kerala, so that we will be able to understand what we mean by this. Now, in Kerala, as my director just said, we get a rainfall of around 3,000 millimeters, which is a very high rainfall if you consider many parts of the world. Okay, there are many parts of the world where we get very, very low rainfall. So this 3,000 rainfall is a very high rainfall. Even the India as a whole, if you take a look at it and average it, it's around 1,000 millimeters. So in Kerala, we are getting almost 3 times the national average. We get a very high rainfall. And then we have got 44 rivers also. But then don't be confused, this when we say 44 rivers, actually our classification, somebody has classified it long back, and we still use that classification. Even a small stream, which is around 15 kilometers in length, is classified as a sort of a river. So that's why we have got this, what we call as 44 rivers. Actually, if you take big rivers, we have only few of them. If to have a magnitude of what it means is, if you combine all these 44 rivers put together, if you take the total catchment area, etc., or the flow, etc., you will see that it is hardly half of the flow of the major rivers in India, like for example, Ganga, Yamuna, etc., etc. Okay, so all these 44 rivers put together, the flow is relatively less. Now, as I said, we get a very high rainfall, but still we have got water scarcity problem. So you might be wondering why this water problem is there in Kerala, which is receiving such high rainfall. And the problem is we've got various other issues as well. The first one is the what you call the topography. Now, Kerala has got a steep topography. It's a narrow strip of land, which is hardly around 70 kilometers in length. And then from the sea level, you go to a very high mountains in a very short span, length of around 70 kilometers. So because of the steep slope, what will happen is, as you, it's very obvious, most of the rainfall that is falling on the soil surface will start to immediately flow downstream. Okay, so it will flow at a very fast rate because you've got a high slope there. Unless you've got something to actually prevent it and stop it, like for example, you've got soil conservation works, or if you've got very good vegetative cover, etc., that may prevent it to a certain extent. But because of steep slope, the major part of the water will actually flow down the streams. And our studies have shown that if you look at the average width of Kerala, as I said, around 70 kilometers, the rainfall will, if it is falling at the origin of a particular river, which is, let us say, for example, around 70 kilometers in length, it will take hardly 2 days to for that water to flow from the upstream of that river to the downstream, that is into the sea, that is 70 kilometers. So that means in a day, the water is traveling through the stream at the rate of around 35 kilometers a day. So in 2 days, it's traveling the entire width of Kerala and then reaching the ocean. So that is one of the problems that we have. We don't have what we call much infiltration that is taking place, or what we technically what we call is opportunity time. The water doesn't have much opportunity time to actually infiltrate into the ground. So that's one of the problems that we have because of steep topography. Another issue that we have is the variation in the rainfall. Variation in the rainfall means both spatially as well as temporally. Spatially, in the sense that the rainfall that we receive in Trivandrum, that is on the southernmost part, is not what we receive in Kasaragod, which is on the northernmost part, because we get more rainfall in the northern part and less rainfall in the southern part of the region. So there is a lot of spatial variation in the rainfall that we receive, and there are some places, like for example, in the northeastern part of Kerala, where we get rainfall less than 600 millimeters. So even though 3,000 is the average, there are places in Kerala where we receive very low rainfall as well. There is a temporary variation in rainfall as well. That means we get a very high rainfall for about 6 months, around 80 to 85%, and the rest 15% we receive in a span of around next to 6 months. Okay, so we have a very little rainfall that is available for most of the half of the year. Okay, you can say. So other half we get very high rainfall. So that is another problem that we have. We also have the problem with, like for example, the land use change, because as I said, from the forest areas we have changed to the agriculture, then to the urban areas, and all this, as I said earlier, will reduce the intake rate or infiltration rate into the soil. So you've got issues like that. Added to that, as I said, we've got bacteriological contamination and other issues. So all this put together, even though we get very high rainfall, we have got problems with water quantity as well as the quality. So these issues are. So the solution to all this is what we call as a water management. The water management. Actually, next one. If you look at it, in Kerala, if I take an example, it's not a scarcity of water. It's a scarcity of management that we have. We are not managing the water in a proper manner. So we have to manage the water properly so that this can be addressed. We have water. We have abundant quantity of water, especially in the winter, in the rainy season. So we have to find out methods to actually store that water and then utilize it in the summer months or the lean month. That's basically what we have to do. So it's basically a sort of a management issue that we have here. Now, this is again just a quick look at the rainfall that we receive. You can see that almost 3-4 months we get almost 70% of the rainfall, and then 15% for the next second season rainfall, and then hardly 15% for the remaining 6 months. And if you look at the bottom graph, that will give you a sort of an indication what's the water demand like. If you take the first 4 months, you got very high rainfall, the blue line is very high, your demand is relatively less. The second season, if you second 4 months, if you take a look at it, your demand overshoots your supply. That's the blue line there. And if you look at the last summer months, you will see that the demand is too high and your supply is very, very low. So probably we'll have to transfer the water that is available in the rainy season to what is to our summer season. That's basically what we got to do. Now a quick look at the water availability in Kerala. As I said, from the 3,000 millimeters of rainfall, we have a surface water availability of around 70,000 million meter cube, out of which we have calculated that we can utilize somewhere around 40,000 million meter cube of water. Now, even though we say that we can utilize a 40,000 million meter cube of water, with all the structures that we have designed, that is including the big dams, etc., we are hardly able to utilize somewhere around 10,000 million meter cube of water so far. So we have still a lot of water that is going out unutilized. That is one of the problems that we have. How we are going to use that, how we are going to store that, that is one of the major problems that we face now. Because even with so many dams constructed, we are able to hardly utilize only, as I said, only 10,000 out of this 40,000 million meter cube. So remaining 30,000 means we have to construct so many more dams, which is not a practical solution, because we've got a lot of environmental issues related to big dams, etc. So getting environmental clearances even for constructing big dams is a big issue now. So that is not a solution now. So we'll have to look at other solutions. What we're going to do there, we'll have a look at it. Similarly, if you take a look at the groundwater, we'll see that our groundwater availability is somewhere around 6,000 million meter cube, and out of which we can utilize somewhere around 6. We have to see that how much quantity of water is actually available to us. What is the quantity that we're utilizing for the different purposes? So how much water is actually left there? All these values or data has to be there if we have to do a proper water management. So when we talk about water management, there are different aspects to that. First thing, you have to look at the meeting from the water demand. How are you going to meet that? Are you going to meet it from the surface water? Are you going for the groundwater? If that is the case, you have to have an idea what is the surface water that is available, what's the groundwater that is available. Are you going to directly do some rainwater harvesting? Okay, and then you have to have an idea about what is the catchment from which you're going to harvest the rainwater, what's the quantity of rain that you're getting, all this, and what is the seasonal changes in the rainfall, all this data you have to have. Are you looking at other sources? Like, for example, as I said, maybe we can look in for desalination if the water is scarce in a particular place, or you can even use technologies like condensing the moisture from the air, etc. All these sort of things. Or you can even think in terms of conjunct use. Conjunct use, basically what we mean is we are combining all these things together. A part of surface water, part of groundwater, rainwater harvesting, all these things put together. Basically what we call as a conjunctive use. Then the next thing we have to look at is the efficiency. You have to look at how efficient we are utilizing the water, because sometimes you will find that especially a lot of studies we have carried out in the irrigation sector, etc., the water use efficiency, we found that sometimes we are using water in a very inefficient manner. Okay, so a lot of water is being lost for evaporation, for deep percolation losses, all these sort of things are happening. So efficiency is something which is very important. Reuse. Okay, we can reuse the water, because some of the places, again, when we talk about water use, we have to keep in mind that we've got two types of use. One is what we call as a consumptive use. Another one is what we call as a non-consumptive use. In a consumptive use, what we mean is that water which you are using for a particular purpose is not immediately available for any other use. Like, for example, if you use water for drinking, okay, you drink that water, immediately that water is not available. Of course, the total hydrological cycle, it will again come out. You will either urinate it, you will sweat it, all this sort of water will ultimately come out and then join the water cycle. but immediately the water is not available. That's basically what we call as a consumptive use. If you irrigate it also, it's basically sort of a consumptive use. There are other uses, like for example, a non-consumptive use. Like for example, if you're using it for in a factory for some cooling purposes, or for moving a turbine in a hydroelectric project, there after that moving the turbine, that water is available. You can use it for other purposes. That's basically what we call as a non-consumptive use. So in some of the cases, we can immediately use that water without any treatment, etc. But in some cases, we may have to treat that water. Like for example, if you are using it for bathing and other purposes, that water can be cleaned and then used for irrigation in your particular household. All those things can be used. Ultimately, we have to look at, if it is large factories and other areas, we have to look at the total treatment of the water and then the proper disposal or use in some other areas. Similarly, not only the water use, sometimes the drainage is also very important. As I said, in many of the places, now what we're facing is we've got flood related issues as well. So we have to look at how we are going to provide adequate drainage to take the water out within a limited period of time, because you cannot, it again depends upon the sort of area. What do you want to, for example, if it is an urban area, if it is an installation which is very costly, then you have to drain it very fast. But if it is a paddy cultivation, you've got a certain amount of time within which the same quantity can be drained out. So depending upon what your purpose is, your drainage requirement, everything will be different. I'm not going to the design aspects of that. Then another aspect which you have to always keep in mind is what we call as a virtual water, or what we call as a water footprint. Now, this is again very important, because one of the questions also I found that it is there. We'll come to that later on. Okay, next. Now, this is again a quick look at the sectors in which in Kerala we'll be using the water. Almost 64% of the water in Kerala we are using for irrigation purposes, and then around 20% for the domestic, that's for drinking and other purposes, and then around 16% for the industry. But if you take the India as a whole, the major part is for irrigation, and followed by again all domestic and industry. Now, this may be the same scenario in most of the countries where irrigation is practiced. Okay, the major part of the water will be used for irrigation sector only. And globally also, if you take the total water that is used, you will see that the major part is used by the irrigation sector. Almost 60 to 70% is used in the irrigation sector. The remaining goes to other sectors. So irrigation is a very important one. But unfortunately, what's happening in the irrigation is the irrigation efficiency is very, very low, especially in developing countries like India. And I think the scenario may be the same in Sri Lanka or Pakistan or Bangladesh or wherever it is. Now, for example, some of the studies that we have done here, we have found that the irrigation efficiency is as low as 40%, 35 to 40%. What does it mean? If 100 liters of water is released from the reservoir for irrigation purpose, ultimately the water that is used by the crop is only 30 or 40 liters. The remaining almost 60 liters is going out as loss. Maybe evaporation loss, maybe percolation loss, maybe runoff from the field, whatever it is. Okay, so that is one of the major issues that we have. We have got techniques with which we can improve the irrigation efficiency to a very high level, especially now we are living in a what we call an era where we have got what we call precision irrigation, agriculture, where we can control the irrigation to very high efficiency. Next, please. Next. Now, this is again just a quick look at some of the losses that is happening in some of the studies that we have done, where the losses are happening, all these sort of things. Now, coming again specifically to water budgeting. Now, what we have to look at is, what we are basically doing is we are first trying to compile what are all the supply sources from where we are getting the water. So the first, if you look at our part, our main source is basically from irrigation, from rainfall alone. We don't have any snow or anything, snow melt. But if you go to North India, we've got snow melt, etc., which is coming to the rivers, but we don't have such scenario in Kerala. So our main supply is basically the rainfall that we get. And the rainfall is actually going out as surface water. Another part is coming out as groundwater. All these things are happening. Evapotranspiration will be happening there in the field. So we are trying to compute what is the rainfall that we receive, what is the surface water that is available in that particular area, what is the groundwater that is available in that area. And we are also looking at whether there's an import of water to that particular area from some other area. As I said, there are places in Kerala where we have water scarcity. So what we're doing is we are bringing water from other places nearby where you've got sufficient water, either through pipelines or through canals or maybe through even water tanks, tankers, lorries, etc. Okay. So this thing might be happening in some of the places. In some of the places, we may be exporting the water because there may be a lot of water that is available that they may not be using so much water. So they, as I said, this imported water is actually exporting from somewhere else. So that also we are taking a look at that. Then our other side, what we're looking at is what is the demand part. For example, the first thing what we look at is what is the domestic demand. Okay, looking at the population that is there, and we've got the standards for providing the water for different types of population. And then based on that, we calculate what's the domestic demand in that particular area. Then we look at the agriculture. We've got the different crops that are grown there. What is the season in which the crop is grown there? What are the irrigation requirements? All these things are worked out. And then we find out what is the type of irrigation that they're practicing there. Is it a surface irrigation technique, or are they using, as I said earlier, are they using for micro irrigation or precision techniques, etc.? Depending on that, the demand also will vary. So we calculate all those things and then find out what is agriculture demand. Similarly, for commercial purposes and industrial purposes, we calculate it and then tally it. Now, again, if you take a quick look at that, rainfall, what we are looking at is we need a lot of data. And the more data that we have, the more accurate our water budgeting will be. Now, the rainfall, normally the data you'll be getting in millimeters. I'm not going to details to that. We will go into that. But minimum of 10 years data is what we look at. But sometimes what we find is in some of the rural areas, the rainfall data may not be available there. So what we're now trying to do is we are trying to take the data from the nearest available station, okay, which is actually suitable for that particular area, and then trying to use that to prepare sort of an initial water budget. Later on, we are establishing our rain gauge in that place itself. And then as the data, we get more precise data, we will change that and then refine this water budget. Okay. So that's basically what we're doing. And then the surface water, now typically, actually, we have to monitor the flow that is taking place. We have to have a continuous flow record of that particular place to find out what is the surface water flow there. But again, in some of the rural areas, we find that that's not available there. So what we are now trying to do is we are normally simulating the runoff in that particular area based on our earlier studies, etc. And then finding out what is a flow that is likely to take place from this particular rainfall on that particular topography and all the other parameters related to that particular place. So we are simulating the surface water flow in that particular area. And then we are assuming that out of which 50% can be utilized. The remaining 50% has to be left in that stream or river itself for the downstream users. Okay, you're not supposed to stop a flow entirely in a particular river and then divert it and use it somewhere else. At least a minimum part of that has to be go down. Okay. Similarly, for the groundwater, again, we have got groundwater data. We have got a block-wise also data that is available on a micro scale. So wherever that data is not available, initially, again, what we are trying to do is we are again simulating it from the rainfall data, as I said earlier, from our studies, which we have carried out in various parts of Kerala. And based on that, we are computing what's the groundwater that will be available. Then the import and export quantity, again, we are calculating based on actual calibration itself. If it is the canal, we can calibrate it and then find out what is the quantity that is being we are getting in the import or export or whatever it is. If it is a pipe supply, again, we've got record of how much quantity is being pumped into that place. All this data is available with us. We are using that. So ultimately, we are computing all this and then combining and then finding out for domestic what is the quantity, commercial what is the quantity that is being used, industrial what is the quantity, what are the losses that is taking place. All these things are computed, and then finally, we will get some sort of a water budgeting like this. Okay, what is the area, what is the irrigated area, what is the rainfall? A lot of data will be just a small part of that. And in simple form, if you take a particular area, this is sort of a water balance that we will get. For example, each month what we are doing is, of course, we can do a water budgeting on an annual basis, but it will be of no use because, as I said earlier, what is happening is if you take the total of Kerala, 3,000 millimeters of rainfall and total runoff that we get from that and compare with the total demand, you will see that you've got a huge supply and your demand is very less and you don't have to do any water budgeting. You've got surplus water. That's what we will get. But scenario is not that. We know that. So if you want to have an actual scenario, we have to actually look at what is actually happening on a day-to-day basis, because every day your rainfall is changing, your evapotranspiration demand is changing, everything is changing, everything is dynamic. So you have to actually look at it every day, what is happening, and balance it on a day-to-day basis. But that is a laborious process. If you're trying to do it for 365 days, each day separately, then it's a laborious process. So what we normally do is, and this is an internationally accepted practice, that what we do is every month we divide it into 10 equal days. You've got 30 days, you divide equal to say 10 day, 10 day, 10 day interval. So 3 intervals will be there in 1 month. So for the each 10 day, we are assuming that within that 10 day, your average, your rainfall will be almost the same, because every day you'll be getting almost, or you average it out, whatever you get for the 10 days. And then your demand also will be almost the same, because there will be slight variations only. So that's the basis on which we do that calculation. And this is normally, for all practical purposes, this is more than enough. So what we do is, for example, in June 1, what it means is not June 1st. What it means is the first 10 days of June. This is the total water available in that particular watershed. Okay, total water that is available. Then the total demand is also given there. So available minus the demand will give you what is the surplus or deficit. Okay, and what's the quantity that is available there. So this way, for the entire year, you will have, for each month, you will have 3 values, whether it's a surplus or a demand. So you have some sort of an idea, where are the areas in which you've got surplus demand, and where are the areas where we've got deficit. Okay, so that's the way in which we normally work it out. And then once we do that, then we look at the, if it is a surplus, of course, we don't have to worry about that. We've got surplus. There is no problem in that. But in the deficit months, like for example, in April, May, etc., you'll see that in the same scenario, it will be a deficit month. Then we'll have to look at how we are going to remove that deficit or reduce that deficit. There are several ways, as I said earlier. Can you go to the previous one itself? What we can do is, here we've got a surplus. So we can think of methods by which we can actually store the surplus and then utilize it in the summer months. Okay, that's basically what we do in that budgeting. Or there are other things, like for example, when we, as I said, one of the major user as far as we are concerned is agriculture sector. Agriculture sector, the efficiency is very, very low. We saw that we have field efficiency of somewhere around 40%. So 60% is going out of the loss. So if you improve the irrigation efficiency, you're saving that much quantity of water. That water can be used in some other sector. So that way also we can reduce the what we call the deficit in that particular season. So there are different techniques by which we can, or if you know it well in advance, we can even think in terms of adopting a cropping pattern which requires less water. So there are various strategies. I'm not, because of the time constraint, I'm not going to the details of all that. So what we do is, ultimately what we try to do is, water budgeting is, we try to look at what is the current scenario and what is the status as far as the different months are concerned. Where we have got surplus, where we have got deficit. Now, another advantage of this is, as I said earlier, in the scenario of climate change, what we're facing now, one of the uncertainty that we have is we don't know what's going to happen in next 5 years, 10 years, etc. So what we're trying to do is, we are trying to look at scenarios. For example, if there's a 10% shortage in rainfall, what will be the scenario now? With this budget, we can easily change that input rainfall and then find out what is going to happen if there is a 10% deficit in the rainfall in the certain months. Or if there is a 10% excess in rainfall in certain months, what's going to happen? So all these scenarios can be simulated, and then we can find out what is going to happen if there is a deficit or increase in rainfall, so that we can be prepared if some sort of a scenario arises abruptly in future. So that is another thing that we do. Now, another problem as far as water budgeting is concerned, what we had is, because for the entire Kerala, as my director has already said, we have got around 1,000 small local bodies. So for preparing water budget for all these 1,000 and odd local bodies, technical expertise available in the state is limited. You don't have so much manpower to actually prepare a water budget for all these 1,000. We cannot go to all these 1,000 panchayats and then collect all the data and then do all the analysis and then do all this working and then prepare a water budget for them. So what we did was to make the example to the work simple, and then we tried to utilize the whatever level of technical expertise, even though it's limited, that is available in that particular panchayat itself. For that, we prepared a sort of an Excel-based software. So we prepared an Excel-based software in which all the basic calculations, like for example, for calculating the evapotranspiration demand or for calculating the domestic demand, all these things, we have done all the calculations in that. So what these local people have to do is they have to punch in only the basic data that is required. Like for example, what's the population in that particular area, which is very easy for them to find. What is the agriculture that is that is practiced there? Which crop they are growing in which season? What is the area in which they are cultivating? All the sort of basic data only they need to input in that. Once they input in that, they will get a sort of an output which says that this is sort of water budget that you're having. This is the area. This is the quantity of water that you're currently using. These are the sectors in which you're using. These are the months in which you've got surplus water. These are the months in which you've got deficit water. All these things the Excel sheet will already calculate. So this is what we're basically done. And that will be explained in more detail by Mr. Vivek. So another thing which you have to keep in mind is when we talk about this storing the water, how are we going to store the water? Earlier in the example, I've said that in Kerala, we have got around 30,000 million meter cube of water, which we are not able to store because many more large storage structures cannot be constructed here because there are limitations of space, there are problems with environmental issues and all other things. So how are we going to store that? So for that, again, another thing which you have to keep in mind is rainwater harvesting, like for example, tanks, ponds, etc. To a certain extent we can do, but there is again a certain limitation to that. Okay, beyond which we cannot store the large quantity in such surface storage structures because of the area requirement and other things. So another thing what we have to look at is we have to look at artificial groundwater recharge. That is another important thing what you have to look at. Okay, we will probably discuss it in later on. Now, another project in which when we talk about the rainwater harvesting is what we did in the Lakshadweep Islands. And I was a team leader in that particular project. Now, in that, basically what was happening in Lakshadweep Islands is we got around 36 islands on the, what we call southwestern part of India. And then there are small islands. The smallest island is only 10 hectares and the largest one is around 6 square kilometers. And out of which only 10 are inhabited. And now one of the major problems that we're facing is because since these islands are very small and surrounded by the ocean, the freshwater that is available there is a small freshwater lens. Okay, the freshwater is available as sort of a small freshwater lens, which is hardly of a depth of around 1 to 1.5 or 2 meter in depth. Okay, that sort of a small freshwater lens is floating over the saline water beneath the islands. So that's a small quantity of water that's available there. Now, what was happening is as the population increased and the people started using energized motors and pump sets, etc., they were abstracting more water and the freshwater lens depleted and the saline water intruded into that, and freshwater availability was depleted in most of these islands. So what they were initially doing was doing desalination, but desalination is a very costly process. Of course, the Middle East, other countries, etc., they can't go in for that because they've got a lot of money. But if you look at some of the Lakshadweep Island, etc., there is a limit up to which we can do these sort of techniques. So one of the successful things that they could do was the rainwater harvesting. So what we did was, it was a Canadian-funded project in which we were able to provide rainwater harvesting tanks to around 20% of the population. Around 60,000 was the population that actually the islands in. We completed that project in 2007, and that during that period, we were able to provide around rainwater harvesting for 20,000 people. Okay, so that was what we did there, and we used all sorts of techniques, like for example, corrosion tanks or line ponds, or recharging the small open wells that is available there. All these techniques were used to actually recharge the groundwater in that particular place. So this is in a nutshell what we have to do. As I said, another thing like what we are looking at in what we're trying to do in Kerala is this artificial groundwater recharge. Why we need that? When we discuss that, some of the questions we will come to that in later. Thank you, and over to Vivek, and then after that we will look at the questions.
Thank you, sir. So straight away, I am going to my slides. Anyway, where sir stopped, I will start from there. Most of the things sir has covered. I'll share our experience in water budgeting in some local self bodies of Kerala. It was a very interesting experience for each one of us. So this exercise started in the year 2018, but we could initiate this process in the last year only. So what happened was we have like our director told, we have a guideline prepared by Sushant sir and the team. So with that guideline, it was very easy for us to, for a common man or one who belongs to that place can do the water budgeting. So I will just explain what we have done in that one. Technical things I will skip also. So water budgeting definition and all, sir has already mentioned. Anyway, it's like a financial budget only, but instead of tracing money flow, we'll trace the water. So water budget accounts all the water in and out of the watershed or sub-watershed, whatever way you are doing. This includes precipitation, evaporation, transpiration, runoff as the movement of water within the watershed, such as recharge to groundwater reservoirs, everything will be accounted in this water budget. It has mainly three components. Major ones are inflows, outflows, and the storage or stock. So hydraulic cycle and all, I think the sir has already explained, so I'll skip those things. So by doing water budgeting, we'll get to know where is our water. So mostly the water will be in the streams, lakes, wetlands, aquifers. So we'll quantify the things in this water budgeting. And we will get to know how the water moves. The pathways like the surface and groundwater movements, all these things will be accounted. And the water, way the water is stressed or not, because of higher abstractions. Some places in Kerala we find a lot of abstractions than the allowed or permissible way. So those things we can get to know in this water budgeting exercise. What are the trends? So whether the water levels are going up or down, or water use is going beyond the this one, that all we will get to know in this water budgeting exercise. Mainly it's a mass balance equation. Inflow minus outflow is the net storage. So inflow is our precipitation, surface water, and groundwater inflows. Outflows are evapotranspiration, surface water outflows, and groundwater outflows. And the the remaining one will be in the as a storage, which can be assessed using the levels in the water bodies in the watersheds. So what are the steps involved in water budgeting? First one is identifying the catchments. So we in the locality we will identify what are the types of catchments in that one. Like example, agriculture, built-up land, all these things will be classified, and then we will calculate the runoff coefficient for each category. Then we will determine the area of each catchment. We will collect the historic rainfall data, since we most of the places which we experience was we don't have the proper rain gauging in the particular watershed or that one. So we collected the available data from the irrigation department. Then we will calculate the rainwater potential of that area, since most of the water we are getting as rainwater. Then we will estimate the water demand. We'll classify all the things: agriculture, irrigation, all the domestic, industrial, commercial, whatever way. Even the we calculated the animals, the numbers also we were collecting. So those things also from the animal husbandry department we got the numbers of animals, pets, everything. So we included everything in this water demand. Then we compared the supply and demand, and we proposed a budget. Based on that, we could plan the storage if necessary, because most of the cases, as sir mentioned, the 12 months we overall, if you see the budget yearly plan, you have a surplus. All the cases we experienced in the 94 panchayats which we conducted last year, all the 94 we got yearly, it was a surplus. But we had lean periods in most of the January, February, March periods. So we we have to concentrate on those periods where we are in short of the storage, or whatever action plans needs to be taken, we can take that. So this is in short the steps we followed. So I will explain a few slides about our Excel sheet. This is an Excel sheet developed for the local self bodies, in which you can see this. Most of the things are very easy to fill, like the area in square kilometer, population. Then you have to fill the forest area, agriculture land, residential area, industrial area, barren lands. So whatever things are there, you can list out. So this is very easy task for them. So then we collected 10 years rainfall from the nearest rain gauge available. Then we classified into 10 days for each month. Then we put an average for all the 10 days. Then we calculated the import and output, export, import quantity and export quantity were also. This is the training which we give. They were supposed to enter the details. So most of the import were from the irrigation canals and all. So the irrigation pattern and all, they collected from the concerned departments. What we done was, we made a team of all the line departments which were in the water sector. So it was very easy for them to manage this data or collecting this data. Then we collected the population details. So population details included everything, every persons in the locality. Then we collected the commercial list of commercial. So that also we classified into different categories. So ones which use less water will be in a first category, like 10 to 100 liters category. So number of commercial entities only we need to enter there. So based on that will be calculated. Then the sheet we have the calculation for the 10 days average. Then main thing was the agriculture thing. So agriculture thing which we added was all the crops we added in that particular area. We give the coefficients for each crop. So they just need to put the area to be irrigated, and which is the how much area need to be irrigated in the future. Those things only need to be done. And the remaining things, like which are the months they are feeding water. So those things will be given one, like it will be irrigated. On those which are not needed, which that will be given 0. So that is how we entered this one. So only thing is that we had to give more stress on the agriculture demand. So more, as sir was mentioning, more 60% above water requirement was for agriculture sector only. So this was to be given due consideration. So ultimately, you will get a water budget like this. In this one, we will have water demand in all the 10 days, first all the months in 10 days, 10 days, and we will get to know which is surplus or deficit. So this is the small exercise we have done, and which we could get good results for this one also. And more than happy thing is that all the people come to know the status of their water. So they everyone was thinking they were having sufficient water for most of the year. So they could realize what is the problem, where they used tanker lorries for drinking water supply. So those things they come to know through this water budget. So there were local interventions also based on the water budget preparation. So and the Kerala state scenario and all, sir has mentioned. So all the we have 14 districts in this state of Kerala. All the 14 districts we selected one block, and altogether we could complete 94 panchayats for the water budgeting. So ultimately we it was proposed to do it for all the 1,000 panchayats in the next coming years, and it is just a beginning of this process. And Kerala will be the first state in India where most of the local self bodies are made to do water budget. So the participation was like all the stakeholder departments were involved in making this water budgeting. So it was very, what is it? It's a mixing of sharing of knowledge, and data was very easily they could collect. And the Kerala problem is that if you see the topography as well as this rain pattern, the northern side receive very little rain after monsoon, but in the southern side, so those things were the challenges when we were telling this to the ground level people. So there's findings. The findings they discussed in the local level seminars and all. So that was a brainstorming exercise for them. So we were also invited for some of the seminars to give some technical advices. So it was it was a more fruitful event by the local level departments. So ultimately, why a city need water budget? So it is water budget is what is a flexible because it allows the city budgets when there is some unexpected water shortage. So as sir was explaining, we are expecting some drought or scenarios. So those scenarios can be modeled or simulated, and based on that we can predict or we can do our what do you say some methods for improving the water in the future rather than putting some restrictions on the water budget. So mainly I'll conclude my session from this. These are some of the uses of water budgeting. Anyway, so the major takeaway was the water budgeting is an excellent tool that will help the panchayats to analyze water distribution and the bridge gap between demand and supply. And water budget will aid local government bodies to design interventions that will solve water shortages, if any, plan their projects better, and also help to increase the land under agriculture. So these are the major takeaways from the exercise we have carried out. So, and we could release one guideline for water budgeting, which we submitted to central government for some policy decision. So we are waiting for that. So that's all from my side. I'm stopping it here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Tanushi,
you.
can we take some questions? Yeah.
Yes, we do. We do have a slide with some of the questions that we've received, and there are some questions that are coming up in the chat box. So we can start. We can start either by sharing the screen, because some of it I think was shared in the presentations. But I guess it would be fair by the participants who sent the questions to share them, and we can go through them quickly and then move to the questions of the participants who have joined today.
Dr. Sushant, you can answer which is not covered in the presentations. Anything is there. You are mute.
Oh, okay, sir. Okay. So the first question is how to perform the water budgeting and importance. I think we have already covered that. There is no need for me to again go through those aspects. Now, the next question is the best software app to analyze water budgeting. Now, there are several apps which are available for water budgeting. If you just Google it, like for example, you got an EPA, have got a water servant water budgeting software, Zone Budget by US Geological Society, SPAW by US Department of Agriculture. There are different softwares. You can just Google through that, and then you can find out a number of softwares out there. But why we did our own sort of a computer Excel program is because we found that if you try to use those sort of softwares, then as I said, we don't have such sort of a people who got some, at least they need a minimum technical expertise to actually input data into that. So they have to look at that various aspects and do that. So we want to overcome that. We want to make it as simple as possible so that local people can easily use it. And that is why we developed our own sort of Excel software. Okay, that is why we did that. But there are a lot of softwares are available. You can just Google that, and some of the softwares I have already mentioned that. Okay, that is already available there. Then which method is simple or accurately determine water budgets? Now, if you want, basically, you have to look at two things. all these water budgeting software or whatever calculated methods, if you want to do an accurate assessment, then you have to actually do it manually by doing all the calculations right by yourself. But if you're using some of the softwares, even the software that we are using now, there are some generalizations in that. Some of the coefficients, some of the aspects which you have to make it simple, we have standardized it. So that because of that, there will be certain limitations that. But for all practical purposes, that is more than enough. But if you're doing some research or something like that, then you have to independently identify all the parameters in that and then do it manually, all these aspects. Like, for example, you have to compute the rainfall, you have to look at how the rainfall is received in different months. All these things has to be analyzed separately. The evapotranspiration has to be calculated separately based on the specific climatic data from that particular place. All these things has to be done separately. There are techniques for that, and then you have to do that. Then you have an accurate water budgeting. But for all practical and planning purposes, I don't think that is needed because it's more than enough. What even if you use some sort of a software like this. Then what are home water budgeting tools? Home water budgeting again is compared to this one is actually relatively very simple, because we don't have much complicated use. We have only the direct, either you have for the drinking and other purposes and other uses like etc., or even small sort of gardening etc. For that, again, if you just Google it, you've got different people have identified simple tools which we can use for that. Okay, so home water budgeting is relatively, even we don't have to do all these things. You can just calculate it based on how much water quantities that is being pumped in your tank. Okay, how many times your tank is getting filled, so you can have an idea about what is the total quantity of water that is being pumped into that system. Then you can look at what are the different uses, what your purpose for which you're using it, and if there is an efficiency loss in some of the places, you can try to modify that. It basically comes as a part of the water audit as well. Okay, so that is something what we can do at a household level. How much water do you use per day? This is a very important question. I don't know how many of you have ever thought about this aspect. How much water actually you're using per day? Mostly when I have a normal sort of not a webinar, but a sort of a physical section, I used to ask this question to the participants: how much water do you use? And normally the range that they give is somewhere around, some say 50 liters per person per day, some say 100 liters per person a day, or 150 liters per person per day. That is a quantity that way normally people will give sort of an answer. But please keep in mind that this 100 liters or 150 liters that you're talking about is the water that we directly use. There is a lot of water that we're indirectly using. And if you're talking about how much water we consume per day, we have to look at both. We have to look at what we directly use. We have to also look at what we indirectly use. What we mean by indirect use is, like, for example, if you look at, say, 1 kg of rice, 1 kg of rice needs a lot of water to actually, right from the field when the seed is sown up to the time when it comes to your table as food, it needs a lot of water. So all this water that has gone into that has to be considered when we look at the water that is used for producing that or using that particular quantity. So similarly, all the things, even the shirt which I'm wearing or the watch which I'm using, all this needs a lot of water actually behind that in some process, or even the transport of these things. If you look at, for example, a petrol, if you need to refine around 1 liter of petrol, you need around 8 liters of water. So like that, we are using a lot of water indirectly. That's basically what we call as virtual water. Now, if you look at the virtual water, if you look at the global average, our global average is somewhere around 1,200 liters per person per day. 1,200 liters of water per person per day. Whereas the direct water that we use is only 100 or 120 liters per day. Again, it may vary from place to place, from person to person, but sort of an average that I'm talking about. Now, the virtual water that we use, 1,200 liters, is again a reflection on the standard of living that you have. If you look at the people who are living in the US or in some other Western countries, etc., there the virtual water use may be very high, because that's a standard of living that they have. But if you look at a poor country, some of the poor countries in Asia or etc., or even Africa, etc., you will see that the virtual water use is relatively less. So that is why the global average is standing somewhere around 1,200 liters. There are countries which are using total water per person per day around 10,000 liters. And there are countries which are using per person per day around 100 to all virtual combined around 100 to 200 liters per day. So that sort of variation is there. So please keep in mind that we are using a lot of virtual water as well. Now, when we talk about water conservation, this is one thing which I stress in almost all my sessions. When we talk about water conservation, many other places I have found that people stressing that you don't leave the tap open, you don't, but that is only the direct water that we use that we are reducing. If you reduce the consumption, you have to keep in mind that you have to actually reduce your virtual consumption as well. Of course, you can say that I'm not consuming that water here at my locally. It may be produced somewhere else. Some electronic goods I'm buying, it may be coming from China. The food that I'm eating, it may be coming from northern part of India. All these things may happen, but somebody is spending that water from me somewhere else. And globally, this has to balance. So that's why when we talk about water consumption per day, we have to think in terms of reducing the virtual consumption as well. Now, how do we reduce the virtual consumption? We have to look at consumerism that we have. Okay, I'm not going to those details. That itself will become another session. Okay, so please keep that in mind. Which sector uses maximum water? We have already said that agriculture sector uses maximum water. Resolution of data for water budget analysis. Now, again, the data is again another important problem, especially when we are talking about the micro level or local level water budgeting, etc. Now, many of the places, what we find is sometimes data availability itself is a problem. So what we are doing is we are not leaving that aside and saying that, no, we are not preparing the water budget. That is whatever data that is available from there or from the neighboring place, with whatever accuracy that we have, we are using that to initially prepare some sort of a water budget. Now, what we are trying to do is, when we are not getting the correct data or very accurate data for a particular place, now we use the data from the nearby place, but the water budgeting doesn't end with preparing a water budget once and then we forget it. No, that's not what we are advising. Now, all the places where we have prepared a water budget, what we have said is, this is only an initial process. It is on a continual improvement process. Like, for example, in ISO standards, you have that what we call a continual improvement process. You go on improving it. Next year, you try to generate your own data. You establish a linkage there and get your own data, and then try to put that into this, so that your next year you can prepare a water budget which is refined from what you have prepared earlier. So like that, within a couple of years, you will get a very refined and accurate water budgeting data for that particular place. In the meantime, somebody just asked me whether virtual water is included in the water budget that we have done now. No, we have not included virtual water budget in this particular thing, because here we are only trying to resolve whatever is the quantity that is available and trying it to balance in that particular place itself. Virtual water is not included in this particular one, but we can include it. But for that, normally what we do is we do a water footprint studies that we have done separately. Even in Kerala, our institute itself has done a water footprint study by utilizing students from a particular area. Now, that water footprint will give you what is the total water consumption per capita per day in that particular place. We can look at that water footprint and then find out if they are using excess water, what are the areas in which they have to reduce it, all those aspects. So that is a separate thing which we are doing. We have water footprint studies. Okay. Now, how to manage soil moisture data from remote sensing products? I think Vivek will come to that later on. How beneficial is auditing approaches in India? Now, actually, if we talk about water auditing, etc., even now it is not done on an extensive scale. It is done on an extensive scale in commercial establishments like industries, etc. They are doing that because they have got a commercial implication on that. Because the more water that they use, they are actually spending more money on that. Okay, both in getting that water, even treating that water, all these aspects are there. So they are basically trying to do a water audit in many of the industries, etc. But on a household level, in a city level, etc., water budgeting as a research studies, many people have done it, but not extensively. Okay, so but nowadays, because of this water scarcity and other issues becoming very, very important, now more and more government and other agencies are getting into this, and water auditing is being carried out. Definitely, it is beneficial to all of us because it gives us an idea about where we are actually wasting the water, where we can actually save it, all these sort of things. Do we need regional strategies for developing crop? Yes, we need regional strategies that we have already explained in that. Does a water budget define a catchment's water on a monthly, annual accurately? We have already explained that, because if you want to define a water budget and you want to get a meaningful idea about what is happening in that particular watershed, then probably we will have to do it on not only even a monthly, we have to do it on a 10-day basis. Ideally, it should be a daily basis, but as I said, practically that is not done anywhere. But so normally the best thing that we do is on a 10-day basis. Okay. And how can organizations effectively establish and manage water budget, regional catchment dynamics, ensuring sustainability for water stewardship? Now, this again, a lot of NGOs and other people can actually get into this, because even now, as Vivek has already mentioned, that people have some sort of an idea that in many of the places we have got enough water. They are not really bothered about it. They are bothered about the water only when there's a scarcity. Only during those months they are aware now there is some problem. But once that we receive rainfall or something like that, then we don't have this sort of a, they forget that. So we have to educate the people, and for that all these NGOs and other and even organizations like this has got an important role to play. Okay, keeping an awareness among people that this is a scenario, and unless and until we are careful about these things, we will not be getting a sustainable development. Okay, whatever development that we're talking about. So that thing we have to keep in mind. What are the provisions for measurement of leakages? Now, measurement of leakages, I don't know, physically leakages you are talking about. Physically leakages, if you take again a look at it, there are a lot of studies being carried out, especially in the irrigation sector, etc. I have already shown a slide in which we have shown that what are the different sectors in which the water is being lost, which are sections in which water is, and what's the percentage of water that being lost. All these things has been explained in detail. Added to that, even the drinking water supply schemes in the cities, etc., they also have these sort of schemes. And today, even in cities like, for example, Surat, they have got advanced technologies where you've got automated systems which is installed in the pipe network itself, etc. So if there is any leakage, etc., in the headquarters itself, they will be able to get an idea about where the leakage is, what's the quantity of leakage that's happening there. All these things are monitored. Okay, so we got advanced techniques in some other cities, smart cities, etc. We are actually implementing that. What are specific challenges do industries often encounter in maintaining balanced water budget? What innovative solutions can be employed to address these challenges, etc., etc.? Now, again, actually, the purpose of the water budgeting is to give us a sort of a complete picture of what is actually happening in a particular field. What is the quantity that is being used? What is the quantity that is being lost? Where we are losing it? All this is given a picture. Whether it's an industry, whether it is a agriculture field, wherever it is. Okay, all these things are being explained there. Now, there are a lot of techniques by which, once we know where we are actually losing the water, where we are actually what we got to surplus water, etc. If you got these things, then probably we can devise strategies by which we can address these issues. So that is being done wherever this water auditing and water budgeting is being, whether it's an industry, whether it's a major irrigation project, or any other aspects like that. What is the positive impact of water in the world? Positive impact of water in the world, I don't know what is basically meant by that. Now, if you take a basic look at it, even the very essence of life is not possible without the water. I mean, the life as we know it, I don't know whether in any other planet or any other universe, some other form of life exists without water. But all those life that we have is possible only because of the availability of water. So what are the positive impacts? Immense number of positive impacts. Now, whatever that we have, whatever facilities that we enjoy, as I said, if you look at the virtual water, all the what we call the facilities, all the living standards that we enjoy now, everything is dependent upon water, because water is one of the primary resource for any developmental activity. Any developmental activity, if you take a look at it, soil and water are the two primary resources needed. And without these resources, none of the development is possible. So all the development that you see globally is possible only because of water. In capacity building and upscaling to water budgeting, capacity building is something which is definitely needed, as I've already discussed, because in many of the places, people are still not aware of what are the issues related to water, what is the availability of water in the local area. All these aspects are not known to them. So capacity building is very important, both at the local level as well as at the official level, which we, in our project, we are actually carrying it out. We are carrying out routinely training programs for both the locals as well as for the officials for creating an awareness on water budgeting and helping them to develop strategies to overcome the issues related to water sector. The gender mainstreaming in water budgeting, again, another important aspect, because in many of the places, for example, in India, most of the water related activities sometimes are done by women, and they have to actually get involved in this. So in all our programs, we are carrying out this water budgeting, whether it's a training program or whether it's a collection of data, whether they're inputting the data, all these aspects, they are also getting involved. So there is no discrimination in that, what we are doing now. How to correlate water budgeting with economic aspects? We already seen that, because as I said, in the water auditing, etc., one of the basic aspects, water is one of the basic resource. So once we do a water budgeting, or once we do based on that, what we do water auditing, etc., we get an idea about where our losses. Like if you look at the irrigation sector in India, I said that the irrigation sector efficiency is very, very low, around 40%. That means 60% of the water is not used for irrigation purposes. It is getting lost, either as a deep percolation loss or as an evaporation loss, etc. But one of the constraints that we're facing is because of the availability of water. Like, for example, the first slide, if you remember, one of the first slides that I've shown you, in some of the northwestern part of India, we are facing acute water scarcity because they are using huge quantity of water for irrigation purposes. And there is a groundwater depletion in those places. So that is creating a problem with the money that is being pumped into the irrigation sector. Now, if you try to improve that efficiency, you are saving that quantity of water. So that water can be used later on in some other place where irrigation is not being practiced now. So that brings an economic boom to that particular area as well. So a lot of economically beneficial activities will be attained once we have this water budgeting, and based on that water budgeting, we do what we call a strategy to how to improve the scenario. Would you be able to explain the basic regulatory economics in water sector? Actually, there has to be some sort of a regulatory mechanisms in the water sector as well. Now, in India, I don't know whether it's what is the scenario in other countries. In many of the places, for example, in Kerala, if you take a look at it, if I dig an open well, I can abstract any quantity of water from that. Nobody is going to question me. It is considered as my private property. But for example, if you take some other countries, like for example, Israel, there even if you take the groundwater, if you are taking the groundwater out, groundwater is also monitored by the government. It's a common property. So there has to be some sort of a regulatory mechanism to control the quantity of water that we use in the different sectors. Okay, so that brings in a lot of efficiency, improves a lot of efficiency, especially in the water sector. Another aspect, what we normally find is, if you look at, for example, subsidy, the government got a lot of energy subsidy for pumping the water from the wells, etc. Now, ultimately, what is happening is because either the power is completely free for them, or there is no, or they are given power for a very meager amount. What is happening is they are using that power to unnecessarily pump a lot of water and then waste it. So there has to be some sort of a regulatory mechanism to control all this, and that can not only save the quantity of water, it can bring in all the associated financial benefits as well. That means that quantity of water that is being saved, the energy that is being used to pump that water, all these things can be brought down. Okay. Now, Vivek, can you go to those two questions which you skipped?
Sir, regarding the soil moisture, the gridded data is available. UN SODA and all with the 0.25 degree resolution is available. But for our case and all, we are not using that much in-depth data. So I think data is available. For some research purpose they want to use, means they can use that. So one or two questions came in a chat box also.
Yeah, make it fast, Vivek, because time to wind up. You can firstly answer, Vivek, then we can wind up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sir, what parameters we have to consider during development of comprehensive water harvesting plan in hilly regions?
Well, in hilly regions, actually, it's not, we cannot just pinpoint to a few points. There are a lot of aspects which you have to consider there. Like in the beginning itself, I said that one of the problems that we have faced in some of our hilly areas is the problem related to landslides and landslips. So when we're talking about the water management in hilly areas, the first thing we have to look at is the land capability classification. Every land has got a certain capability classification based on which we can say that this is the particular purpose for which this land can be used. So that is one thing what we have to look at. Another thing is when we look at the water management in those areas, more than water conservation, sometimes you have to look in terms of how to take out the water from that particular area within a limited period of time. Drainage will be more important in the hilly areas when we talk about water management practices. So in nutshell, we have to look at both the conservation as well as drainage in those particular areas when we are looking at water conservation in the hilly areas. So there are many other aspects as well, but I'm not going into the details of all those things because of constraint of time. Because two things we have to keep in mind. One is that you have to drain it out properly. You have to look at the land capability classification based on which you have to consider the particular use.
We have come to an end, sir.
Okay.
Almost all the questions are answered. If not, we will reply you by mail.
Oh yeah.
So then, Dr. Samuel, Dr. Vivek, and Dr. Sushant, thank you very much for the very insightful, and it opened us to think on a lot of new things. Like gave us, I guess, a lot of new topics to study, plus more insights on water use, how we should be mindful in development, and something that needs to go in. This topic needs to be taken to a wider level, I believe. Anyhow, I guess at a later stage we can discuss things related to this topic, which will be of use to a lot of our members. Thank you once again for taking time over to share these research findings. And I believe anybody who's interested can get in touch with Dr. Samuel, who's a member. His details are also, we do have it on our web also. So you can reach out to Dr. Samuel so that he can then pass the information to Dr. Vivek and Dr. Sushant. Thank you very much for joining and being with the webinar 13, and we look forward to meeting you again with another webinar soon. Thank you.